Should I sell my inherited house in Georgia myself? Hey guys, I'm Brad, the Probate House Guy. Thanks for checking out this video today. By the way, I am an active real estate investor and a licensed real estate agent in the state of Georgia. And over the last 10 years, I have helped over 300 sellers get their property sold, whether that's a cash deal or listing it for them in the traditional fashion. I made all these videos because we've learned a thing or two about probate and estates over the last 10 years, and I'm just sharing my knowledge with you. By the way, I am not an attorney, nor do I claim to be an attorney, so please don't take anything that I say as legal advice. I highly suggest that you consult with a probate attorney or even a real estate attorney to discuss your unique situation and get some real legal advice from them. If you'd like to chat with us about the options on the property that you've inherited, we'd be happy to talk to you about that. You can go over to probatehouseguy.com and fill out the form there on the page, and a member of our team will be in touch with you ASAP. Anyways, let's get back to the video. Thanks. Hey guys, welcome back. It's Brad, the Probate House Guy. So you inherited a house and you're thinking about selling it yourself, aka for sale by owner. Well, if you're thinking about doing that, there's a few things that you need to be aware of and that you should think about before you do that. So I'm going to kind of talk about some of the pros and the cons of selling a house for sale by owner. Obviously, let's start in the pros column first. Most people, first of all, the reason that they sell for sale by owner is because they think that they're saving on commissions, right? They don't want to pay the expensive real estate commissions. And by the way, I have sold two of my own personal houses for sale by owner myself. Well, I really sold them off market. I sold them to sort of people that were acquaintances of, or either someone we knew or someone that was an acquaintance of someone that we knew. I didn't actually like list it for sale per se, but I did sort of talk through the grapevine. So there's that. Another sort of pro of selling for sale by owner is that you've got sort of less strangers through your house. You have kind of more control over who you're going to let see your house and what, all the traffic that might come through your house. You do have a little bit more control over that compared to like if you're listing with a real estate agent. I mean, they're going to list your house on the MLS, and you're going to kind of get whoever coming through your house. So if that's a concern of you, I don't know that just between you and I, you want to get as many people as possible through your house. So because that's more potential for more offers, but I can understand where some people might be weirded out right that. And that's actually why sometimes people have sold to us as an investor is because they, for one reason or another, they don't want people going through their house. For an example, I walked through a house recently and this person had a really nice house on the surface, and I looked at it and I was like, why don't you want to list this house? I don't understand. And then I went down in the basement and I discovered that this person had a small marijuana grow operation in their basement. It was for their own personal use. But then I quickly realized why they did not want to list this house on the market is because they didn't want people to discover their marijuana growing operation in their basement. So they wanted to sell to us as is. And I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. All right, cool. So anyways, those are some of the reasons why someone might not want someone coming through their house. Additionally, one of the pros of selling your house is you do have a lot more autonomy as to, like I mentioned, who's coming through the house, certain aspects of the house when you're going to do showings, which you can control the showing traffic through an agent as well. But you do have a little bit more autonomy in the process. You have a lot more control over it compared to like an agent who's sort of running it for you, right? Some people might feel like that they don't have enough control with an agent. Okay, so let's jump over to the cons side of selling your house for sale by owner. So you've inherited this house, you want to sell it for sale by owner. The cons of doing for sale by owner is, generally speaking, you will get less exposure to the house. That's twofold. Number one, it's not on the MLS. The multiple listing service, which is the system that real estate agents use to list properties out there. It's called the multiple listing service. If you're in Georgia, there are sort of a few different MLS systems. To name a few, the big one, the big 800-pound gorilla in the metro Atlanta area is going to be FMLS. And then you have a system called Georgia MLS, which covers the metro Atlanta and some surrounding areas and kind of south of Atlanta. And then when you get up into North Georgia, you have North Georgia MLS. So there's different MLS systems, and then there's some down in like sort of the coastal areas of Georgia. So there's a few different MLS systems throughout the state of Georgia. In the past few years, a lot of the MLSs have started to somewhat consolidate a little bit in terms of they operate independently, but they syndicate their listings across multiple platforms. So you could maybe see listings from, even houses in South Carolina, you can search for them in FMLS, right? So they've kind of combined forces there, which I think is a good thing. So anyways, there's less exposure there from that standpoint, right? It's not on the MLS. And second of all, a lot of agents are, whether you like this or not, and whether you agree with this or not, because of the fear of a lot of buyers agents not getting paid commission, they are less likely to show your listings to, well, first of all, they're not seeing it in the MLS because that's where a lot of agents look. And then second of all, because of their fear of not getting paid a commission by you for one reason or another, they may not show your listing to their potential clients, to their buyers. And, some would argue, well, they should show it to you because they're trying to, and they shouldn't worry about getting paid. And I get it. I understand that argument. But the reality is like, in the real estate business, and this is just my opinion, and I think a lot of other agents will agree with me, buyer's agents are the hardest working agents in this business. Buyer's agents are carting people around and showing them houses. Yeah, has the internet changed this dynamic a little bit? A little bit. But buyer's agents do a lot of work. And especially when you're dealing with picky buyers who the agent might show these buyers like 100 houses and they still can't pull the trigger on a house, right? Imagine showing someone that many houses and they still haven't bought a house yet. And by the way, the agent does not get paid unless the deal closes, right? So they're doing all of this work free of charge until the actual deal closes. So there is a little bit of anxiety from an agent standpoint of not, if they don't get paid on a transaction, are they going to do all this work for no money? I don't know, right? Would you do all this work for no money? I don't know. You kind of sort of put yourself in their shoes a little bit. Okay. So you're going to have less exposure both through the MLS and from the fact that the agents might show it. Another con is more autonomy, right? Sometimes having more autonomy in the transaction is maybe not a good thing. So you have to think about that. Maybe you're, controlling it a little too much, and maybe you're controlling the showings so much that you're not getting enough activity, so therefore you don't get as many potential buyers, so therefore you don't get as many offers. You have to sort of think about that. Or you're controlling things too much and it's limiting your reach, right? And then lastly, probably one of the biggest cons, and I think this scares a lot of people out of doing for sale by owner, and rightfully so, is sort of the legal piece of it, right? Contracts, dealing with closings, negotiations. A lot of people don't like to negotiate, right? And so the people are afraid of that, and then they don't know the contracts. Real estate is a complicated business, and there's a thing in Georgia called the statute of frauds, which requires all real estate transactions to be in writing. And you can go online and find some, sort of generic legal contract templates and download those and do all right. But sometimes those contracts are missing certain aspects that may or may not be important to situations that arise. For example, if you go use the GAR contract, the Georgia Association of Realtors purchase contract, which you have to be an agent in order to have access to this, the GAR contract, every year it gets longer and longer. The thing is like 7 or 8 pages long. Now, granted, 90% of the verbiage in the GAR contract protects the broker and the agent, and only like 10% of the actual verbiage in that contract pertains to the buyer and the seller themselves. A lot of it is to protect the brokers, right, from, litigation and that sort of thing. Unfortunately, we're in a very litigious society nowadays, and people can sue you for just stupid things, which is why we need a loser pays system, but that's another topic for another day. Anyways, so there's that piece, is who do you get the contracts? Where do you get the contracts? What I would say is find, there's a lot of good closing attorneys here in the state of Georgia. I'll plug my closing attorney that I have used for a very long time, for the last, not my entire time in this business, but for the past 9 years. I did use another company before them for a very short time, but I use Rand and Associates. They used to be in Roswell. Now they're in sort of Johns Creek, Duluth area. And then he has a satellite office down in Sandy Springs. Joshua Rand is the closing attorney there. I have closed pretty much every single real estate deal I have done. Every purchase I have done in the last 9 years has been, we're talking 300 plus transactions with Josh Rand in his office. He's a great closing attorney. Obviously, you're welcome to choose whoever you want, and there's a lot of other really good closing attorneys in the metro Atlanta area, North Georgia, whatever. Find one that, ask online, get recommendations. And a lot of times, if you pick the closing attorney ahead of time, they can provide you maybe a purchase and sale contract to use for your things. And then ultimately, once you find a buyer and you guys go under contract, you can then sign the contract and hand that off to the closing attorney, let them handle it. Now, it is customary here in the state of Georgia for the buyer to choose the closing attorney that closes the transaction, but it's not required. There's nothing set in stone that says that the buyer has to choose the closing attorney, but typically speaking, it is customary for the buyer to choose their attorney because they're typically getting financing and that sort of thing. So they want to work with someone maybe that they're more comfortable with compared to maybe your attorney. But the reality of the situation is, in the state of Georgia, the closing attorney, if there is a loan, the closing attorney represents the lender. The closing attorney does not represent the buyer or the seller. They are sort of have a legal obligation to protect the lender in the transaction. Now, in a cash deal, obviously there is no lender, but a closing attorney in Georgia is essentially acting as like a title agent, like you would in other states where you might go to a title company to close. Georgia requires all real estate closings to be facilitated by a licensed attorney, so therefore that's why we have closing attorneys here in the state of Georgia. But in essence, maybe if you were to go to New York, this is a different ball game where you kind of the buyer and the seller have an attorney, and that's a whole racket, and I'm not going to talk about that in this video. Ask anybody how a real estate closing goes in the state of New York, and it's a nightmare, as you can imagine, because you've got two attorneys arguing back and forth till the cows come home. But in the state of Georgia, the attorney acts like a title agent. Okay, so those are the pros and the cons. Saving on commissions, less strangers going through your house, more autonomy in the transaction for the pros column. And then in the cons column, you've got less exposure. More autonomy is also a con. And then the legalese contract section of it here. Now let's talk about for sale by owner tips. So here's a few tips I have for you. As an investor, as 300 plus real estate deals closed in this business. I'm also a licensed agent. By the way, I hang my license with One Source in Woodstock. So we do offer the unique perspective that we can list a house for you, or we can buy it for cash as a cash buyer. So anyways, this is my unique perspective here, which is you should advertise. If you are doing for sale by owner and you're advertising a listing out there, first of all, you should put it out on Zillow and some of the other platforms if you can. That will, some of these platforms will kind of syndicate it out there to get as much exposure as possible. You really want to put it out everywhere. So if there's local, Facebook groups that for your particular area, like for example, I live in Cherokee County, so there's a group called Cherokee Connect. There's a lot of people that browse those. I'm in some of these groups throughout, the metro Atlanta area. You want to put it out in those groups. You want to put it out. There's some real estate specific groups for Georgia and Atlanta. Put it out wherever you can. You want to get that as much exposure out there as possible. And then you also, in your listings, you want to advertise that you are protecting an agent, that you are paying 3% is pretty typical. You can pay whatever you want, but most of the time I pay 3%. Now, some people say, well, I only pay 2%. And it's like, well, you're being a cheapskate. Pay 3%, right? it's better to offer a little bit more money. The more incentive you can provide to get an agent to bring a buyer your way, the better, right? That's just my opinion on this, right? And it's purely my opinion. But put in your advertisement that you are offering, you will pay, agents protected, will pay commission. And then once you go under contract, that agent's probably going to send you basically an agreement that you sign as the seller, that you agree to pay them a commission on the backside. So don't be surprised if they send you that little contract afterwards that basically says that you're going to be paying the commission. And because they're working with you, maybe if they're an agent and they have a buyer and they're working with you directly as a seller, there's probably a few other disclosures that their broker's going to make you sign. So don't be surprised if you get some of those documents. Like one is like permission to sell unlisted property, that sort of thing. So don't be surprised if you have to sign some of that stuff. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but don't be alarmed if an agent sends you that and asks you to sign that, because their broker is usually requiring that. And if you have questions about that agreement, you can always call their broker and ask them about that. Generally, most brokers are pretty cool, and we'll educate you on that. Most of them are not total a-holes like some people think they might be, but all the brokers I've ever worked with are generally pretty good. Anyways, so that's make sure you're paying commission, make sure you're putting it out there as much as possible. And then lastly, make sure you are pricing your house appropriately. The number one mistake that most for sale by owner listings have is they are overpriced. So these people think, oh, I'm going to save on commissions and I'm going to list it for some ridiculous price, and somehow I'm going to make like way more money than I ever would. The market will only pay what the market bears. So like, just because you think your house is worth $500,000, but if all the comparable sales in your neighborhood in the last 6-12 months are only selling for $400,000, you might find some idiot buyer that might pay you cash $500,000, but it's highly unlikely. Your house is going to sell for what the comparable sales sell for. And if you're not sure how to come up with that number, you should. I have another video about this. You can get. Obviously, I would always recommend getting an appraisal, an official appraisal from a licensed appraiser, and then maybe you do this or you do this in lieu of the appraisal, but you get what's called a BPO, a broker's price opinion. Or maybe if you have some friends or family who are real estate agents, ask them to run some comparable sales for you, because especially today in 2026, when I'm making this video, price matters more than anything in this world. We are not in the same market that we were in 3 or 4 years ago, where you could just kind of throw anything out there for any price and anyone would buy it. The market today is completely different than it was a few years ago. You must price your home appropriately. And if you overprice your house, that is like a shot in the foot. That is a recipe for disaster. And that listing is just going to sit and sit and sit and sit on the market. And some people will argue and they'll say, well, why don't they just come in and offer you less money? Like, okay, I've listed it for $500, but I would take $450. Okay, well, here's a little surprise to you. Most people just won't even make you the offer because they're afraid of offending you with a lowball offer. So they won't ever offer you the $450. You'll never get that offer from them if you're listed at $500. It's just like psychology. People don't want to like step on someone else's toes and piss them off. Now, are there some people that do that? Absolutely, right? But most people are afraid to offend you, so therefore they won't make what they think is a lowball offer. If you're listed for $500 and they're going to offer you $450, they're afraid to do it, so they just won't even do it. So therefore you won't ever get that $450 offer that you would actually take, right? So you have to price your home appropriately. I cannot stress that enough. Anyways, I hope that was helpful. I'm Brad, the Probate House Guy. If you've decided after watching this video that maybe FSBO is not for you, and you either want to sell, just get a cash deal on your inherited house, we buy houses for cash. I've been doing it for the last 10 years, helped 300 plus homeowners sell their homes for cash. I've done a lot of estate and probate deals. This is like my bread and butter. This is what I know how to do. I know how to navigate all that stuff. Or if you want to go the traditional route and list it with an agent, I'm also a licensed agent. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I hang my license with One Source Real Estate out of Woodstock, Georgia, and I would be happy to talk to you about both of those options, whether you want us to buy it for cash or you want to list it in the traditional fashion, go over to probatehouseguy.com, fill out the form there on the page, and then a member of our team will be in touch with you ASAP. Thanks again for watching this video. I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.